Hey everybody, it is Hyper, and I'm back with another episode of Guns and Games, and we are continuing to cover the guns, optics, and accessories of firearms in the game SCUM. And in this episode, we are going to be covering the V3 Holographic site, as it is known in game. Now, basically, this series is a series to teach people how to be better shooters at SCUM, and to also learn about the real life counterpart of these firearms so people can get a better understanding of how to use and learn why these are relevant to not only our history, but our current day world affairs and the importance of firearms in our society. So, without further ado, let's get on to learning about the V3 holographic site from the game SCUM. This site, known as the V3 holographic site in game, is based on the EOTech HWS XPS3, which is the most common holographic site that you would think of if you hear somebody talking about a holo site. It's hugely popular in pop culture as well as video games. First, see it in Call of Duty, we see it in Battlefield, we see it all over the place. It's in pretty much every modern game. All right. Now it's also in movies, as I said before, and you always see it on the rifles of some of these like high-speed pipe-hitting dudes, and that's because it is a favorite of people in the soft community for a number of reasons. And don't get me wrong, it is a great site, but it's best in the hands of people that have specific high-speed missions like that, rather than the average Joe or the soldier or marine in a line company. We'll discuss that later, though. But you see them portrayed that way a lot because they are used by those people in real life. So, in the game SCUM, we have two examples of this. Not only do we have the V3 holographic site, we also have the XPS 300. Now, this site is another holographic site made by EOTech, but the difference between these two is one is chambered for the 300 blackout round, which is not the same as the in-game 223 or 5.56 caliber ammunition. 223 caliber 5.56 millimeter ammunition. They have different ballistic properties, so everything I talk about relating to the blackout sight in-game is not really relevant until they add a weapon in SCUM chambered for a 300 blackout round. Hey guys, fun fact about the XPS 300 in SCUM and the XPS 300 in real life is they have a similarity, and that is the font used on the XPS 300 logo is the same font used to make the SCUM logo. I thought that was pretty cool. I just noticed it while I was doing my research for the video, and I don't know, the XPS came out a long time ago. I mean, people were posting about these online back in the 2020s, so I don't know, Gamepire seems kind of sus to me. Anyways, let's get back to the rest of the important stuff in the video. That being said, what is a holographic site? Well, it's in the name. HWS stands for Holographic Weapon Site. Simple as that, right? Yeah, I know, holographic weapon site, but what does that mean? A holographic weapon sight is a sight that uses a laser diode and it passes it through either a splitter or an etching or both to produce a hologram reticle that is superimposed over the target. And I know you guys are saying like, okay, well, what the hell does that mean? Speak normally. For all you mouth breathers out there, this just means it's a laser reflection that makes a funny shape in front of your eyes. There, that simple enough for you? Anyways, people like these sites for a reason. They're actually very innovative designs, and the mechanism that makes them work is very clever. I can go through this more in depth later on, but basically there's a little laser in there that is made into a shape by the etching, and it reflects off of a mirror onto a slightly reflective, not really lens, it's not a lens because it's not considered an optic, but like a piece of glass with a film on it. So it makes it appear as if it's just floating in thin air, right? It's really cool stuff. It's like a sight you would picture in Star Wars or something like that, right? So anyways, let's talk about what makes it special. So, for starters, the XPS holographic site has many pros. One, it's a BDC sight, meaning it can compensate for bullet drop at distances, and it also has built-in range estimation. Now, this is not the only sight in SCUM that does this. There's also the ACOG as well as the P2223. I made videos on both of those sites prior to this. Definitely check those out. If I do say so myself, I did a pretty decent job. And I think if you guys learned a lot from this video, you would learn a ton about the other two scopes as well, just so you can really cover all your bases and be the ultimate survivor, right? Anyways, back to the pros of the XPS holographic sight. Other than the fact that it has BDC and range estimation, the next thing is, due to its design and how it works, you can easily use this sight with both eyes open, meaning you're not going to see this ghosting or this double vision that you might see if you're trying to focus on a front sight post and a target at a long distance. Since this one has one focal plane, it has no magnification, and you only have to focus on the target and superimpose the reticle in front of the target, you don't have this issue of seeing that double vision and stuff, meaning that any shooter can use this with two eyes open very easily. This is a huge advantage to not only soldiers, but competition shooters alike that are doing stuff like 3-gun, because it allows them to get sight acquisition extremely quickly without sacrificing your field of view or your peripheral vision. Speaking of better fields of view, since it is a pane of glass that has a sight superimposed on it, you don't have to worry about the sight itself obscuring your battle space in front of you when you're aiming down sights. Now, take this for example. If we look down iron sights, you're going to notice that because the iron sights are a physical object in the world, when we hold them up, they need to be held up by this metal A-frame post and the rear sight. This blocks out all of the ground space from you to your target position, meaning you can't see what's going on in any of that space. This is unsafe because there could be something there you don't want to shoot, or it could also be unsafe because you don't have SA on any enemies or combatants that might be within that range of you. And if you're moving and aiming down sights, you might lose sight of any potential obstacles that are in front of you and in your direction of travel. So that's awesome that you get this better field of view thanks to it being literally a transparent window you're looking through rather than an actual iron sight physically in front of your eyes. The next thing is, you do not need to align your sights. Typically with iron sights, you're going to have to get proper sight alignment. Otherwise, you're not going to be accurate, especially at farther off distances. Since this is a superimposed sight and it's zeroed directly towards an impact point in the distance rather than a rear sight and a front sight, you don't have to align it. This means the bullet is going to hit wherever the reticle is aiming. It doesn't matter if you're holding your weapon at an angle. It doesn't matter if you have like scope shadow or if you're, cheek weld and, eye relief is really stupid. It's still going to hit where the dot is. And that's because it's based off of the focal plane from your eye to the dot, not from the rear sight to the front sight to the target. So it simplifies it, and this means that as long as the dot's on the target, regardless of your other fundamentals, the bullet's going to hit right there. This can be a double-edged sword, especially when it comes to shooters who are not very proficient in their craft. So essentially, this is like a futuristic iron sight that has all the benefits of iron sights, like the simplicity, but it takes out all the negatives. So the next pro we have here is, it's night vision compatible. And I know you guys thinking like, well, what does night vision have to do with this? Typically with sights such as, other optics like the P223 scope or iron sights, they're very difficult to see through with night vision. That's because you have a really messed up field of view with night vision, and they are an obstacle. You can't get a proper cheek weld or eye relief because the night vision takes up such a large portion of not only your field of view, but your face. It's physically attached to you, so you cannot look down sights if you wanted to. Since the EOTech, or since the holographic sight, has this high, far forward profile, it gives you enough room so you can use night vision goggles and still look down the sight. And there's a little button on the side you can press that changes the reticle to a really, really, really dim illumination. That way you can see it through iron sights without causing them to be washed out. This is amazing for people, especially, again, like special operations forces and stuff like that, because they do a lot of nighttime raids. And this makes it so they can use an accurate sight that they're comfortable with without having to fumble around with a crazy like grip on the weapon or anything like that, and they don't have to really rely on putting a laser on target. They could actually physically use their sights, and that's a pretty good advantage. The lasers work pretty good too, something like your PEC 16s and the like, but I think that's pretty cool nonetheless. Particularly, I would say mount an NVG behind it. I would probably say having a removable NVG that you just pop on at nighttime would be a better use of it rather than using it with goggles, but it works either way. And that's huge. Most optics are not compatible in such a manner. And in SCUM, it kind of makes sense because you can use it with night sights in SCUM, even though you can technically use all the sights in SCUM with your night vision, which is not really realistic. But hey, I guess the more you know about the sight, you get a little less in there for IRL applications, right? So that pretty much covers all of the pros of the XPS sight. And if there's pros, there definitely are cons. Because if there were no cons, you would see every single weapon on the planet using this sight, right? Hey guys, really quick, I forgot one of the most important pros of the XPS holographic sight, or any holographic sight in general, and that is the fact that you can co-witness with these. Now, imagine that you're aiming down sights and there's like an EMP or you run out of battery or something. Co-witnessing essentially means that you can still see your iron sights through your holographic sight while it's up, meaning you can see both of them at the same time, hence co-witnessing. This is nice because, again, like, you can turn off your holo sight, or in case it malfunctions, you'll still be able to use your iron sights, right? So that's a huge advantage. And again, I have a love-hate relationship with the holographic sight. It's an amazing sight. Again, it fills a niche role, but that's another huge pro. You can use your iron sights and the holo sight at the same time without having to remove the optic or like flip up and down a magnifier and stuff like that. Co-witnessing is really big advantage to this sight. All right, back to the other part of the video. Okay, boomers, time for another rant. I called you guys out in the last video for saying that iron sights are superior to optics and you're a bad shooter if you use an optic, which is factually untrue. And if you still think I'm wrong, you're wrong, and I can prove it. Again, I will in another video. But anyways, this time, you guys can all rejoice and get right back on that high horse because I'm calling out the Zoomers. And that is because Zoomers love holographic sights. I don't know if it's because of video games or because they saw, you know, people using them in their favorite movie, like 13 hours and stuff like that. But I'm going to talk about why this is stupid. One, you're not an operator. You're not going on these nighttime raids. You're not training to these extremely specific roles. You're not in an environment where you have unlimited access to batteries and this and that, and these really short missions. And the reasons are many. So, for example, operators have missions that are planned out weeks, even months in advance. They check the weather, they check the conditions, and they really plan out exactly how long they want it to take as far as going in and getting out. This is not the same for frontline troops. Frontline troops are there to accomplish a mission in the long haul. They don't know exactly how long it's going to take. They're not going to be planning out the mission extremely far for the individual rifleman. They're thinking on the bigger picture. This means you need to be prepared for stuff that may not be present in something like a CQB raid within a small compound. You need to be able to shoot at a distance. You need to be shoot at close range. You also need to be able to have an optic that is serviceable with small amounts of equipment, because you don't know when your resupply is going to be out there on the front line. You have no idea. It's dependent on so many factors. Whereas these guys in the CQB type jobs, these operators, know exactly where and when they're going to be going and how they're going to be getting there, and exactly what the mission logistics and supply are going to be. You don't know that as an infantry person on the line. You have to rely on simplicity, because these optics need to be serviceable by the everyday soldier, the average soldier that's not elite, to do these things, right? This means you need to keep it simple. It needs to be durable, because you're not going to get the maintenance time that these soft guys get either. You're going to be in the mud, you're going to be in the dirt, in the cold, in the wet, in the rain. Whereas these operators guys, they will experience these conditions too, but it's typically, when they're using sites like this, in a much smaller time frame, and then they get the maintenance time. They have the support to take care of these expensive pieces of equipment, whereas the frontline soldiers are not really going to have that. You don't know when you're going to get batteries. You don't know what the weather conditions are going to be like. These soft guys typically have a much better idea of that, right? So Not to mention, this sight is not, it's not efficient at ranges past like 200, and it gets even a little bit iffy at 200. From then on, the basically the blur around the sight, you can focus it, blah blah blah. I get that, but having to finick with that when you are in the front lines is just, it's ridiculous. You shouldn't have to do that. Whereas if you have like an intermediate range optic or sight, or iron sights, which are better because they don't blur out your target at certain really far distances if you're using your proper sight picture and alignment. So iron sights are even better than this past like 200 or 300 yards. Yes, there are exceptions to every rule. I understand that. Maybe you dialed yours in super crisp. That's not going to be the case for every soldier on the front line. Get a good optic that's extremely durable, that can work at any distance. Get an optic that you don't have to do all this maintenance to. Get an optic that doesn't rely on batteries and, you know, solar power. Get an optic that is good out to any distance, close or far. That's what you need as a soldier on the front lines. That's what rebels need. If you think guerrilla fighting is going to just be door to door all day long, you're wrong. It's complex, and you need to be prepared for anything as a frontline soldier. Whereas, like I said, these soft guys have a lot more prep time. They've got a lot more support behind them, and they have a much better idea of exactly what they're going to be doing in given situations. Sure, they're prepared for anything, but they are niche fighters for very niche roles. You are not, as the everyday person. Is it fine to have one and train with them? Yes. I love these sights. They're fantastic. But to rely on this as your main weapon sight, your main optic, it's not realistic. And I urge, especially new shooters, to stay away from relying on something like this rather than just iron sights or a better option that does a more multi-role job. All right, so I know I pissed a lot of you off, but it's true. I mean, I picked at the boomers last time, so I had to pick at the zoomers. Now, let's get out of here before they start posting memes about us being snowflakes and choosing the proper bathroom and stuff like that, because that's a whole nother can of worms that I don't even want to mess with right now. All right, let's get back to the video. So, for the cons of the XPS holographic sight, well, for starters, it is terrible in video games. And I'm going to show you why. Look, let's take a look at the sight really quick. You're going to notice if I aim down sights and I move left and right, that the reticle moves as I move. This is absolute bullshit, because if you're holding your weapon properly and you have proper positive control of your weapon, your sight picture shouldn't change like this. They started doing this in Call of Duty when they introduced holographic sights, and when you move left and right, the sight itself moves. That does not happen in real life, unless you physically make it do that. You move with your weapon and your sight staying the same. You don't adjust your sight picture, you don't adjust your eye relief or anything like that. So the fact that this moves around, you can see the reticle drifting as I look up, down, left, and right, that's not real. And if you do have your fundamentals completely down, you have that proper grip, you have that proper sight picture, and you're stable with your positive control of your weapon, and this shit's still happening with your line of sight in real life, then go see a doctor, please, and stay the hell away from me, because that means your eye is doing some shit like this, and that's gross. That being said, holographic sights in video games are complete bullshit. The next thing is you know, two eyes don't matter. We're in a video game. This is a 3D space that is rendered in a 2D image, right? Like, this is not actually 3D. So whether you have stereo vision or not does not matter. It doesn't matter if you have one eye open, one eye closed. You know what I mean? Like, because as far as it matters in the game, whether you have one eye open or not, your view of the battle space, your view of your sight picture does not change at all. So there's no real advantage to using that in a game either. So again, that's another reason there's no point to using a sight like this in a video game. But if it's all you got, it's definitely better than irons. The next issue is it is battery and solar powered if you get special ones, right? And this is not bad. I mean, they have a pretty long battery life. They can last like 1,000 hours with continuous use at the max brightness setting, which is not bad at all. But batteries fail. Different conditions such as extreme cold and extreme heat can cause the electronics to not work properly. And especially if they're solar powered, if you're in places like nighttime, underground, or in inclement weather, you're not really going to have a reliable source of solar power. So this is 2 extra points of failure that you wouldn't have if you were using iron sights, or say something like an ACOG that has an internally illuminated sight that does not rely on electricity. So that's just something that could be an issue. The reason it works so well for special operations forces is because their missions, typically when they're using sites like this, when they go on raids, which are quickly in, quickly out, they don't last a very long time. And they have a much better logistics and maintenance workflow than, you know, your average GIs do. So it works for them. This is not a good site for bugging out. This is not a good site for booging. This is not a good site for a line company on the front lines. And it's not for everybody. It's not. It's for high-speed people or people who are specifically in very CQB environments. That's a better way to explain it. Anyways, another con is it's very heavy. It adds a lot of weight to your rifle. I know you might not think it does, but it does. It's like solid steel construction. It's very heavy duty, which is good. It's durable. But when it comes to iron sights or an optic, it doesn't have magnification or all the other really good benefits to having a medium range optic or a multi-range optic, like say the ACOG. It kind of is a trade-off. It doesn't have magnification, meaning even if you get a really good sight picture, once you're at distances past like 300 meters, it gets very hard to be accurate with this. Even if you have a proper sight alignment from your point of view, based off of things like occlusion from the lights and just all kinds of things, it's very difficult to see your target without magnification. I would rather use iron sights at those distances than I would use a red dot sight, just because of all those reasons, right? So it is a short range sight. I'm gonna say it right now. It's a short range sight. It may have BDC and all that other good stuff, but it's not good enough to use at those ranges, right? And you guys are like, but Hyper, you could just get a magnifier. Get a magnifier. But guess what? The magnifiers add even more weight. They add another failure point. They add more complexity to your setup. They add more weight. And not only that, they're expensive as hell. The EOTech itself is about $720. That's MSRP. You're not going to find them for that cheap on the market in the real world because they're never being sold for that. They're sold for more, and they're in more scarce numbers depending on where you live. And the next thing is the cheapest magnifier they have that is specifically meant for the site is $650 by itself. All it does is magnify your field of view. And when it does that, it degrades your sight picture. It degrades the battle space field of view, and it kind of takes away all the advantages that the EOTech has. At this point, just use an ACOG. It's only like $1,150 on Amazon, and it takes all the cons away. You don't need batteries to run it, and you don't need illumination at all if you want to use it. It's super durable. It's only one optic. It's not overly complex, and it weighs less than the combo. Like, I don't know. There's not really a real reason to actually use this unless you're a soft guy fulfilling a niche mission. They're great, but just for the average shooter, I mean, not so much. I don't think they're... All right. Well, now you know the pros and cons. Let's get on to, you know, the other stuff. Bullets, they are physical objects in the world, meaning they're affected by something we like to call gravity. And for all of you rock eaters, that means if you shoot a bullet up in the air, it's going to eventually come back down. You know, there's a reason that it hurts when you fall. It's because, just like a bullet, there's also gravity pulling on you. This means that our bullet has an arcing trajectory. It's going to go up and out of the barrel, and then once it gets past its highest point or its apogee, it's going to start falling down until it hits the ground, okay? Now, the farther out you go, the more the bullet drops. Now, try and picture this if you would. We're going to do a little diagram right here to kind of explain this. We have stuff called sights. Now, in a perfect vacuum, in an absence of gravity, this sight, if it were a laser beam, would shoot perfectly straight forever, right? So let's just pretend that it's a laser beam going perfectly straight forever wherever you're aiming the sight. Now, the bullet is not going to go perfectly straight. As we said, it has an arcing trajectory. Now, we have to zero the sight. We want to make sure that the reticle is going to have a point where the bullet's trajectory intersects that reticle at certain distance. And since the bullet has an arcing path, it's going to look something like this. Okay. Now, you're going to notice this arc is going to pass through this straight line of sight at multiple points. This is similar to a parabola in mathematics. You're going to notice that it passes over this x-axis twice. That's why those are the zeros, because that's where there is zero elevation above or below the reticle, meaning that's where the bullet will impact at that distance. And since it has two of these, every single point of aim on the scope depending on which one you zero it to, will pass through 2 points. Now, for an RCO or an ACOG, we zero at 25 meters because roughly at 100 meters, it's going to pass through the same point again on its way back down from its arc. This means if you're closer than 25 meters, you have to aim with a sight much farther below your point of zero. And if you're between 25 meters and 100 meters, you're going to have to aim a little bit above that. And anything past 100 meters, since it's not going to come back up magically through that x-axis again, it's going to keep falling down, we just have bullet drop off from that point on. Same thing applies to the sight such as the EOTech, because again, it is a BDC sight. This stands for bullet drop compensation, right? Now, bullet drop compensation is used because you're going to notice if we want to hit a target farther out, we have to aim a little bit higher to make the trajectory impact that point, right? So our sight picture is going to be a little bit lower than it would be otherwise. Now, this is awesome because the sights can literally just mark that on your optic, your reticle, or your iron sight for you. And that's why range estimation is going to be our next thing, because it allows you to determine which bullet drop compensation method you're going to be using for that specific target depending on its distance away from you. And we're going to explain that to you next. So, for the sight, it has these convenient markings, and these are the dot itself. Now, the dot on an EOTech is ranged for 50 or 200 meters because it intersects the line at 50 and 200 meters, where the trajectory and the line coming out from your sight, I mean, that's where they're zeroed, okay? So 50 and 200 meters is accurate for the holographic sight. Now, the next point of aim, if you were to be using a different EOTech, because they offer several ones. They have a 1-dot model, a 2-dot model, and a 4-dot model. The 2-dot model has 2 dots, one above the other. You can take a look at the XPS 300 in-game for that example, but again, that one's not sighted properly, so we're not going to cover it. And that bottom dot is supposed to be sighted for 500 meters. Now, there's also a 4-dot model that adds 400 meters and 600 meters, but again, it's kind of not really useful because it's not a magnified sight, and it's just not really ethical to be shooting at live targets at that far distance without magnification. It's just not, for a number of reasons. Anyways, let's get back to the other sight points. Now, for the one in-game, you just have the dot and the circle. Now, if you look at the bottom of the circle, you're going to notice that little bottom, what do we call it, the bar or the line or whatever it's called, the leveling line, right? At the top of that circle, the very edge of that circle, the very bottom, that is going to be sighted for 7 meters. As we discussed before, the closer you get to your target, if you're within the first 0 point, you're going to have to aim a little bit above your target, and this accounts for that. So within 7 meters, your engagement distance, roughly 21 feet, which is indoors, that's what you're going to be aiming with, and I can prove that right here. So let's take a look at these targets. We're going to be aiming at these targets, and look at the very bottom of the circle. I'm going to just aim right here so you can see that the bottom of the circle is where the bullet impacts. See that? Bottom of the circle is a bullet impact. So 7 meters, like indoors range, anywhere indoors, you're going to be aiming with the bottom of the circle to get those shots on target every single time. All right, let's get into the fun bits, which is the range estimation itself, right? Now, you guys ever notice that the farther you are from something, the smaller it looks? Well, that's because based on the way our eyes work and how we perceive 3D space, size is proportional to distance, meaning that the farther away something gets, the smaller it's going to look. But proportional meaning if it's 4 times as far, it's going to look 4 times smaller. Or it will look 1/4 of the size it did when it was 4 times closer. Meaning a target at 100 meters is going to look 4 times bigger than a target at 400 meters. You kind of get the correlation there? This is important because the fact that we know that this is a proportional thing, we can account for it using set standards. Now, I'm about to disappoint every girl on Tinder right now, but the average height of a fighting age male all over the world is around 5 foot 8 inches. So in my previous videos, like with the ACOG, I talk about how the sights are made to match the height and the width of the average combatant. Well, it's based on 5 foot 8 inches. This is important because 5 foot 8 inches is going to look a specific way through specific sights at specific distances. Now, let's give a little demonstration of this. You're going to notice that this was very intentional. The size of the circle was made this size for a reason, not just because it looks cool and it's a good sight picture, but because it actually serves a purpose. Now let's look through this site really quick. Let's open up this little table I have right here, and we're gonna take a look at the site picture itself. You're gonna notice if we aim down sights, what are you gonna see? You're gonna see this site picture. That means at 100 yards, this is what a 5'8" person is gonna look like. Meaning the top of their head to the ground is going to fill the circle at 100 yards or 100 meters, roughly. It's not a perfect conversion, but isn't that neat how that works? So if you see the top of their head to the bottom of their foot, you know they're roughly 100 yards away. Now, this works at greater distances. Look at the site picture for 200 yards. So 200 yards is twice as far as 100 yards, meaning your target is going to look twice as small, or 1/2 the size of the target at half the distance. So this means since the dot is exactly halfway up the circle, it's at the center point, and it's the radius of the circle, you know that, hey, if it's halfway through the circle, it must be twice as far away. So now you know it's at 200 meters if it's halfway the size of the circle. That is so cool. It gets kind of ambiguous at 300 yards. I mean, it takes up 1/3 of the height of the circle, which makes sense mathematically, but it's kind of visually hard to guess this, especially with such a small magnification, but it'll make more sense at 400 yards. At 400 yards, a much more round number that you can easily divide up by picturing it yourself in the battlefield. You just cut it in half and then cut each of those halves in half. If it takes up 1/4 of the circle, it's 400 yards away. Now, if it doesn't take up half the circle, but it's not quite small enough to be 1/4 of the circle, it's got to be somewhere in between 200 yards and 400 yards. Therefore, you can kind of guess that it's 300 yards away. You see how that works? It's not too overly complicated, but you'd be surprised. A lot of people screw this up all the time. But with a little bit of practice, I promise you, it just becomes second nature. It becomes like an extension of your body, an extension of your eyes at a certain point, if you practice enough, which you all should be if you're using this stuff on your setups. And yeah, that pretty much covers it. I'm going to do a quick demonstration at each one of these distant points so I can show you exactly what that's going to look like in-game and roughly an approximation of what it'll look like in the real world. So we'll be right back. Alright, I already showed you guys what it looks like to shoot with the 7 line, or the bottom of the circle with this sight picture, and how 7 meters means you aim at the bottom of the circle. Now let's show you 50 meters. I told you the dot was ranged for 50 meters, and I'm just going to prove it right now. Let's just aim at, like, I don't know, the edge of this 5, or I guess the edge of the circle in 50. And you're going to see that the bullet impacts where the dot is aimed when I pull the trigger. Simple as that. The dot is ranged for 50 meters. 50 meters away, you're going to notice that your target is going to be twice the size of the circle. So, yeah, you can see that this is roughly like, probably like, I don't know, let's see. This will be 50 meters when... It's kind of hard to gauge. Yeah, so there's the ground to the top of the target. This is roughly 50 meters away. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, see? Okay. Simple enough. 50 meters is 50 meters. It's also sighted for 200 meters, but I can't show you from this distance because the range in SCUM has all these bullshit shrubs and stuff, so I'm going to have to climb in the tower and show you guys the rest of the sight pictures. Alright, now we are at our firing position, and these are going to be our firing points. Now, we already covered 50 meters and 7 meters. Now, let's look out towards 100 meters. Remember what we said before, that the height of a 5'8" combatant is going to be the height of the circle at 100 meters. And we can see that this is a target 100 meters away, and that remains true. From the floor all the way to the top of their head, it is the total diameter of the circle. So that's how that range estimation works. And when we're at this point of aim, it's actually really nice because if you just put the top of the circle at the top of their head, you're supposed to... Actually, let me check my ammo really quick. Okay, there we go. You're supposed to get impacts roughly center mass in that vital region, roughly the chest. Let's see. Am I out of ammo? Of course I am. Excuse me, guys. You're supposed to get impacts roughly where that vital region is. And remember, this is because the point of aim between the two is supposed to be slightly higher than the dot at 50 or 200 meters, because the trajectory of the bullet is higher than that would be at these distances. So let's see. Yeah, there you go. So aim above the dot, roughly a third to a halfway between the dot and the top of the circle at 100 meters. And there you go. Let's set up at 200. All right, we are now set up at 200 meters, and let's try and use our range estimation. So remember what we said. The total height of the target from the deck to the top of the combatant's head is going to be half the diameter or the radius of the circle. So that's pretty much from the dot to the deck or the dot to the top. For our intents and purposes, since at 200 meters, the dot is our aim point, we're just going to use the bottom of the circle to the top. And if we put it's kind of hard to see just because SCUM uses this clunky radian measuring system, but if we put this dot roughly at the head of the target at this distance, you see that remains true. We can tell this target is indeed 200 meters away because the floor to the head is the distance from the bottom of the circle to that dot. Now, that means we aim with the dot at this distance to get effects on target. Now, again, this sight is not super precise, so we're going to do our best to get effects on target. And you can see that hit roughly where I was aiming. We're going to hit the bottom of the target, hopefully. We'll have to fire another one because, again, the bullet cam is not running at like 60 frames. It should be. Hopefully in the future it will. Yeah, you can see I was aiming right at the head with a dot at 200 meters, and the bullet went right through the head at 200 meters. So you know that the dot aim point is accurate at 200 meters, and the range estimation at 200 meters also works. Now, I love this sight, but at sight pictures past 200 meters, it gets a little bit shitty. That's just because the nature of this is it's an illuminated hologram, so there's going to be a little bit of light spillover, right, at certain distances, so it's going to be a little bit blurry. It's not super crisp, and range estimation gets a little bit difficult at these distances because holding the target at the proper, at least in the realm of SCUM, holding it at the exact angle is difficult because SCUM snaps to different aim points rather than being fluid, rather than having it be infinite. It's dependent on your DPI and stuff, but it's kind of weird the way SCUM does it, right? So anyways, this is 300 meters away. You can see it's roughly a third of the height of the reticle at 300, and at 400, you can barely even see the target. But if you cut the reticle in half, then half again, that's roughly the height of the target at 400 meters. So the range estimation does work, but look at that target. The dot is like the width of the target, so the chances of you getting a precise shot off at this distance is not very high. And people are like, yeah, but you just said iron sights are like better than optics, or you don't need optics and stuff. I don't. I'm just saying that the way the dot is shaped is it's very large at this distance, and your point of aim is the center of the dot, meaning you are going to cover up your entire target area, right? So rather than using iron sights where you aim just like right on the edge of the top of the iron sight for proper sight picture, this completely covers up the target at that distance. It's kind of hard to explain right now, but you're not going to get precise shots out past like 200 meters with this thing. So really it's limited from anywhere 0 to 200 meters, and that's where I would say it would be the most effective to use this, because that point on, it's just there's no real point in using it at any distance past that. One, because the aiming mechanics in SCUM, since they are set at specific points of aim and angles, you'll see that. And then two, it's just not really meant for that, guys. It's got two endpoints. It's got the dot, and it's got the bottom of the circle, and that's really where it shines, and it does that job very well. All right, well, let's get on to the rest of the video now that you guys understand that. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and learned some new stuff today so you can become better at shooting in video games and in real life. Now, the reason I make these videos is because I think the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms and just to defend your own existence as a human being is so important, and it's something that people look past every day as they become more complacent. Now, I don't care about the color of your skin, whether you're black, white, purple, or anything else. I don't care if you're a man or a woman. I don't care if you're gay or straight. I don't care what your religion is. I think that every single person needs to understand and be informed about firearms, the regulation, the history behind them, and how they're relevant to protecting our future. Because if we're not allowed to say and speak our minds, and we can't defend the right to do so with firearms and we're not allowed to even defend our own lives in any way, then we have nothing, right? So I think since I'm a huge gamer and I do a lot of content as far as video games go, I wanted to do something that had some more meaning behind it, just besides, haha, this is funny, or haha, let's go play some video games, right? Now, I hope you guys like what I'm doing, and I hope you think it is as important as I do, because if you agree that firearms are important to everybody, regardless of your personal identity and demographics, then I think you guys will definitely be welcome as part of my community, right? So thank you so much for watching. Be sure to leave some feedback, tell me what I'm doing, and if you enjoyed the video, don't be afraid to like and subscribe so you can see more of my content in the future. I would love to see you hop in the Discord. I'd love to see you join the Instagram and Twitter that I have. You know, follow me on those places. That way you could stay up to date on things that are going on the channel, just see some cool memes, and it would just be cool to get to know all of you guys. I think we're at a time where gaming has become really woke, and it's become really just mainstream to the point where we have a lot of people that have no real respect or emotional attachment to gaming. So it's just really become like this toxic place where you can't really relax and enjoy yourself anymore. I want to fight back against that too. That's why I started this channel. That's the other reason. One is firearms and gaming. The other is to build a community of people that want to get away from all that static and that noise, and just be around other sane people that are cool to talk to, that have their head on straight, and just want to see the best things, not only for gaming, but for our future, right? So thank you guys so much again for watching. I can't wait to see you in the next video, and I will see you then.